The stars had always felt peaceful once. They shined like tiny promises of hope scattered across the endless dark. For humanity, they were the next step, the dream that carried them beyond the limits of Earth. Generations worked, struggled, and sacrificed to build homes among those lights. Worlds were seeded, cities grew, and humanity learned to survive among alien suns. For a long time, they believed the galaxy was a place of wonder, full of discovery, trade, and friendship. They met other species, made alliances, signed treaties, and joined what was called the Galactic Union. It sounded grand, like the beginning of a shared golden age. But deep down, the galaxy never really trusted humans. They called humanity unpredictable, emotional, dangerous. They studied humans the same way scientists study wild animals, always curious, always cautious. Still, humanity tried. They sent teachers, builders, doctors, and explorers. They gave more than they took. But peace doesn't last long when fear hides behind smiles. It started quietly. The first human colony went silent. No distress calls, no evacuation signals, just silence. The Galactic Union said it was a communication failure. Then a second colony vanished. And then a third. Each time the same excuse: technical fault, local instability, pirate attack. But the truth was darker than anyone imagined. By the time the message finally reached Earth, it was already too late. The truth came not through official channels but through a smuggled recording, a short broken video from a dying outpost. The footage showed alien ships, not pirates, not invaders, but Union fleets, firing on unarmed transports, burning human settlements to ash. The last voice in the message said only 2 words before the feed cut out. "They're cleansing." The word spread like wildfire. Cleansing. Genocide. Humanity had been betrayed by the very council they trusted. Billions died across distant colonies before anyone on Earth could even organize a response. Some burned in their cities, some suffocated in collapsing domes, and others simply vanished as orbital strikes erased entire continents. The Union called it containment. They said humanity had become too aggressive, too unpredictable, a potential danger to galactic peace. So they decided to neutralize the threat. That's what they called it, neutralization. To them, it was just a policy. To humanity, it was extinction. When the Union fleets finally reached the edge of the Sol system, they found nothing waiting for them. No defense fleet. No warning. Earth was silent. The aliens believed their campaign had succeeded, that humanity had fallen. They didn't understand that humans were never known for giving up quietly. In the dark ruins of the colonies that still burned, survivors gathered. Refugees from 1,000 worlds met in hidden outposts and cold mining stations, far from Union censors. They had no leader, no government, no armies left, just pain and rage and the quiet understanding that no one was coming to save them. The survivors built small ships from wreckage, patched together weapons, and sent messages to each other across the black. They called themselves nothing. They didn't want titles or nations anymore. They were just human, and that was enough. Every story shared among them carried the same tone, not of despair but of determination. They spoke of the children who never grew up, the cities that never woke again, and the friends who vanished beneath burning skies. But they didn't cry. They planned. In that silence, something began to grow, not hatred but purpose. Humanity had always been slow to unite. They fought among themselves for centuries. But when the galaxy turned against them, they found a unity no government could ever force. Every ship that survived became part of something larger. Every engineer, every scientist, every soldier, and all worked together. They stopped sending diplomats. They stopped writing appeals. There were no more words left to give. Humanity had spoken with kindness once, but now their voice had been taken from them, so they chose a new language, one the galaxy would understand. Warheads. On a dead moon orbiting a forgotten gas giant, the first new forge was lit. Old ships were melted down to build new ones. Hidden asteroids became shipyards. The survivors built not for comfort or trade, but for revenge. They didn't want to rebuild what was lost. They wanted to make sure it could never happen again. The people who worked in those forges didn't sing songs or wave flags. They worked in silence. Every bolt they fastened, every circuit they connected was part of a promise that no one would ever erase humanity again. Time passed. years, maybe decades. The galaxy forgot about them. New species joined the Union. Trade flourished again. The story of the human genocide became a warning tale told in alien schools, a reminder of what happens to those who defy the Council. Most believed humans were gone forever, but humanity hadn't died. They had simply gone quiet. In the depths of dark space far beyond mapped routes, they tested new engines. The first faster-than-light jump ships, built in secret, vanished into folded space and returned with data no one in the galaxy had ever seen. The survivors didn't just rebuild what they had lost. They learned, adapted, and improved. Every broken technology stolen from the Union was studied, rewritten, and reimagined the human way. When they finally spoke again, it wasn't through words. It was through the flash of engines across the void, through the hum of reactors awakening after a century of silence. The first human fleet rose not from Earth but from a dozen hidden colonies, united under one purpose. They didn't send warnings. They didn't announce their return. They simply began moving toward the stars that had once betrayed them. Those who saw them described it later, not as an army, but as ghosts. Ships without transponders, no broadcasts, no calls, just cold, steady lights crossing the night. The galaxy didn't know yet. The Council continued to debate politics and trade, unaware that the species they had wiped from their records was watching from the dark. Listening, waiting. The humans didn't seek peace anymore. They sought something older, something far more primal, balance. For every human world that was burned, they would burn one back. For every innocent killed, 1,000 of the guilty would pay. But even in their anger, they weren't wild. They were precise, deliberate, almost patient. It wasn't hatred driving them anymore. It was memory. When the last meeting among the surviving leaders ended, no speeches were made. They stood around a holographic display showing hundreds of dots, every planet that once took part in the genocide. One by one, those dots were marked red. Targets. There was no cheer, no applause. Only quiet understanding. Someone simply said, "We remember," and that was enough. The silence that followed wasn't sadness. It was focus, a kind of calm humans had never known before. They had nothing left to lose, nothing left to fear. The galaxy had shown them its cruelty, and now it would learn the price of its own arrogance. In the deep black between the stars, the human fleet began to move. Engines lit up, casting pale blue light across cold metal hulls. The ships carried no flags, no symbols, just the marks of countless scars from battles past. Each one carried within it the pain of worlds destroyed, and the resolve of those who survived. And somewhere, in the empty, cold silence of the void, a whisper echoed across the darkness. They thought we were gone. The first ship accelerated, leaving a trail of light that cut through the dark like a blade. Others followed, dozens, then hundreds. The stars ahead of them seemed to tremble as if they knew what was coming. The galaxy would soon remember the humans, not as victims, not as allies, but as something far more terrifying, not because of how they fought, but because of how they endured. And in that quiet beginning, when the engines roared for the first time after the genocide, humanity made a vow that echoed through every surviving heart. They would never ask for peace again. The years that followed were quiet, too quiet. The galaxy had moved on, pretending that the genocide had never happened. The Galactic Council had rewritten history, calling the destruction of human colonies a necessary act to preserve order. They told their people that humanity was gone forever, a tragic but justified end. But out there, hidden beyond the edges of known space, humanity was still alive. The survivors had built something the galaxy couldn't imagine, a network of broken worlds, each one working in silence. No banners, no politics, no speeches, just purpose. There were forges burning deep beneath old asteroids. There were training halls carved into frozen moons. There were children born in hidden bunkers who had never seen starlight, but had grown up hearing stories of Earth, of blue oceans, green lands, and skies filled with hope. Those stories kept them alive. Those memories kept them human. The ones who had seen the genocide firsthand rarely spoke. They didn't need to. The pain in their eyes said enough. But pain had turned into something sharper, determination. Across those secret worlds, the survivors began to unite. Not under a flag, not under a name, but under an idea that they were all one people now. No nations, no rivalries, only humanity. Old captains who once fought for different powers now worked side by side. Engineers who once competed for contracts now shared every design freely. Every scientist, every mechanic, every miner, all had the same goal: rebuild and never again allow anyone to decide humanity's fate for them. They started by collecting what little was left. Damaged ships from the old colonies, broken satellites drifting in dark orbits, abandoned stations forgotten by the Union. Anything that could still function was taken apart, studied, and rebuilt stronger. But rebuilding wasn't enough. They knew the galaxy would come for them again sooner or later, so they began to prepare. The first step wasn't weapons, it was unity. There was no leader at first, no council to command them. Just small groups connecting through encrypted transmissions. One world would send supplies to another. One fleet would protect another's workers. Slowly, from the chaos, a structure began to form. Not a government, a brotherhood. A silent, unspoken understanding that humanity's survival depended on trust. People who had once sworn never to fight again picked up their tools, their rifles, their courage. They didn't do it out of revenge. They did it because they couldn't bear to see their children grow up in fear. And then came the meeting, the first and last of its kind. It happened in the shadow of a dead star, in a system so remote that no council sensor had ever scanned it. Dozens of ships gathered there, battered freighters, heavy carriers, stealth craft, and all survivors. No one wore uniforms. No one saluted. They just stood together, connected by a shared silence. One of the oldest among them spoke first. His voice was calm, almost tired. They wanted us erased. They wanted our name forgotten, but we're still here. So the question is, what do we do with what's left? There was no argument, no shouting, just slow nods and quiet determination. They all knew the answer already. Humanity had tried peace. It had tried diplomacy, and the galaxy had answered with fire. Now it was time to speak a language the galaxy would finally understand. Warheads. They didn't rush to strike back. No, humans never acted without thinking. They studied every weakness, every supply route, every military command the Council had. They watched from the shadows, listening to the same systems that once spied on them. While the Council celebrated their victory, humanity built fleets in silence. Massive ships, each one designed to fight alone if needed. No luxury, no wasted space. Only armor, engines, and weapons. In hidden shipyards, the sounds of construction filled the air. Sparks flew as metal met metal. Entire families worked side by side, from the oldest engineers to the youngest apprentices. Everyone had a role. Every hand mattered. They learned to use what they had, repurposing alien technology, mixing it with their own designs. Where alien engineers focused on elegance, humans focused on survival. Where the Union built for efficiency, humans built for endurance. Their ships weren't pretty. They were terrifying. Heavy, dark, and unyielding. The children who grew up in those hidden worlds didn't play games of exploration or adventure. They played war games, not out of hatred, but because they understood that someday it might be real. They learned how to fly, how to fix engines, how to survive in vacuum. By the time they reached adulthood, they were ready to protect what remained of their kind. The adults didn't speak much of revenge. They didn't need to. Every scar, every broken world, every story told around dim fires reminded them why they were there. Humanity wasn't seeking glory. They were preparing to make sure no one would ever harm them again. Years passed. The Council still believed humanity was extinct. Their records showed no human presence in any known system. They had erased every mention of Earth from their archives. And so the galaxy forgot, until the day humanity returned. It started small. A Union patrol ship vanished near the edge of a trade route. No distress call, no debris, just gone. The Council sent another patrol. It disappeared too. They blamed pirates. But when a transport convoy vanished, hundreds of ships, the Union grew uneasy. The truth was simple. Humanity had found them first. The survivors had watched, waited, and chosen their moment. They didn't strike in anger. They struck in precision. They hit communication relays, energy depots, and shipyards. Every target was chosen with care. Every attack left one message behind: silence. The Council didn't even know who was attacking them at first. The ships that struck were unlike anything in their databases. Vast, dark, untraceable. No symbols, no signatures. Just cold mechanical ghosts. And then one day, a damaged alien vessel limped back to base. Its last recovered audio was short, only a few seconds long. A voice, human, calm, and clear, spoke through the static. "You thought we were gone." That was the moment the galaxy began to remember. Fear spread quickly. The Union tried to hide the truth, but word leaked. Whispers began to move through alien worlds. Stories of human ships, silent, unstoppable, ruthless, appearing out of nowhere. But those who truly knew the story understood something deeper. Humanity wasn't destroying worlds out of hate. They weren't burning cities for pleasure. They were sending a message, the same one the galaxy had once sent to them. "You taught us what fear feels like. Now you'll remember who taught you." Back in the hidden colonies, the people didn't celebrate. They didn't cheer for the victories. Every strike, every success was marked by silence and quiet remembrance. They still carried the weight of what they had lost. Their anger had turned into something colder. Purpose. No one cared for titles anymore. There were no heroes, no generals. Only humans bound together by survival. On one quiet night, a group of workers stood outside a half-built ship, watching the glow of its engines light the dark sky. One of them looked up and whispered, "Do you think they'll ever understand?" Another replied softly, "Maybe not, but they'll never forget." And so humanity continued to rise, or not loudly, not proudly, but steadily. Every new ship launched was another promise kept. Every factory that lit up was another heartbeat of a species that refused to die. They didn't want to rule the galaxy. They didn't want to conquer. They only wanted one thing, safety. And if safety had to be earned through fear, then so be it. They had spoken before with kindness and words. This time their voice would be forged in steel and silence. In the cold reaches of space, a massive fleet gathered, ships of every size, every type, each carrying the mark of countless worlds lost. The crews stood ready, watching the stars that once betrayed them. They didn't know what awaited them out there, but they knew one thing for sure: humanity would never bow again. As the engines roared to life, one thought echoed across every ship. Every heart, every soul. After the genocide, humanity learned something the galaxy never understood: that sometimes silence speaks louder than words, and soon the galaxy would hear that silence. The galaxy had become comfortable again. After years of quiet, the Galactic Council believed the chaos had ended. Trade routes reopened. Markets flourished. New treaties were signed. On the surface, peace had returned. But that peace was built on a lie. The lie that humanity no longer existed. In the council chambers, alien diplomats spoke proudly of galactic harmony. They told stories about how the galaxy had overcome its dark past. But when the lights dimmed and the meetings ended, some of them still whispered about the strange disappearances. Patrol fleets gone missing, stations suddenly silent, entire mining outposts left empty. They blamed pirates or solar storms, anything but the truth. Because the truth was something they didn't want to face. Humanity was back. The first sign came without warning. On the outer rim of Union space, sensors picked up dozens of unidentified objects entering real space. They weren't broadcasting any signal. They didn't match any known design. The Union Defense Network tried to make contact, but there was no response. Only silence. Moments later, the first world went dark. The alien soldiers stationed there never stood a chance. The human fleet had arrived. Their ships moved like shadows, silent, coordinated, unstoppable. No announcements, no warnings. Within minutes, orbital platforms exploded one after another, falling like burning meteors through the planet's skies. But here was the strange part. The humans didn't destroy everything. They didn't target civilians, didn't wipe out the cities. They went after the command centers, the fleet bases, the ones who had ordered the genocide long ago. It was fast, precise, and cold. When it was over, the humans were gone again, vanishing into the void before reinforcements could even arrive. The survivors of that world would later describe it in one word: judgment. At first, the Council refused to believe it. They said it was impossible. Humanity had been wiped out. Their fleets were destroyed, their worlds burned. But when the wreckage of the first battle was recovered, they found something they couldn't explain: human technology, but not like before. Stronger, smarter, faster. It was as if the species they had destroyed had evolved in silence. And then came the message. A single transmission was received across multiple systems. It wasn't a video, not even a voice, or just a line of text appearing on every console, every display. You started this. That was all. The council panicked. Fleets were deployed. Military worlds were fortified. But humanity had learned the value of patience. They didn't fight open wars anymore. They struck where it hurt the most. Communications, logistics, leadership. Convoys vanished. Fuel stations went dark. And when the council tried to coordinate, their own networks failed. Somehow the humans were already inside their systems. No one knew how. In the deepest parts of the galaxy, entire sectors fell into chaos. Alien soldiers began refusing orders, frightened by rumors of invisible ships appearing out of nowhere. There were reports of strange signals, human voices whispering through static, faint and broken, as if ghosts were haunting their transmissions. But they weren't ghosts. They were the living. In one distant system, a council fleet of more than 100 ships waited in formation, ready to defend a key outpost. They had been ordered to hold their position at all costs. Hours passed. Nothing happened. Then their sensors detected movement, hundreds of small objects approaching fast. The fleet commander thought they were meteors. He was wrong. They were drones. Human drones, sleek and silent, each carrying enough firepower to tear a cruiser in half. They swarmed through the fleet like angry hornets. Within minutes, half the ships were burning. The survivors tried to escape, but the jump gates suddenly went offline. The humans had disabled them remotely. It wasn't a battle. It was an execution. When the smoke cleared, only wreckage remained. Among the debris, drifting in silence, was a small black probe. It carried a single message burned into its surface in human script. We asked for peace once. When the council saw that message, they finally began to understand. Humanity wasn't seeking peace anymore. They weren't asking for forgiveness. They were delivering their own kind of justice. But even as their worlds burned, some alien leaders still refused to admit their fault. They called humanity a plague, a mistake that should have stayed extinct. They declared a new crusade to finish what the genocide had started. That was their final mistake. In the following weeks, humanity unleashed its true power. Entire systems vanished from the star charts, their suns dimmed by clouds of debris. Every human strike was coordinated, every attack clean and calculated. The galaxy's most advanced fleets couldn't even track them. How could they? The humans had learned to fight like no other species. They didn't rely on numbers. They relied on adaptability, creativity, the very traits the council had once called dangerous. And so the hunters became the hunted. Inside their massive meeting halls, the council argued endlessly. Some demanded surrender. Others wanted total war. But as they debated, their fleets kept disappearing. Even their home systems weren't safe anymore. The aliens started seeing strange symbols carved into the wreckage of their ships. A single emblem, an old human flag burned into metal. To them it was a warning. To humans it was remembrance. And yet through all the destruction, humanity never spoke directly. No broadcasts, no speeches, no threats. Only silence and precision. Some of the alien soldiers began to feel pity or maybe guilt. They remembered the human colonies, the ones they had helped destroy years ago. They remembered the screams, the fires, the way the humans never begged. They just fought until the end. Those memories haunted them now. One alien commander, desperate and afraid, tried to send a message of peace. He broadcast across every channel, begging for a ceasefire, promising that the council would stand down. There was no reply. Only a flicker of static. Then, hours later, his ship's sensors detected movement. One human vessel approaching slowly. It didn't fire. It just hovered there, close enough for both sides to see each other, and then a message appeared on the commander's screen. Simple words, written in clear human script. You didn't listen before. The commander closed his eyes. He understood. Moments later, his ship's reactor went dark. The humans didn't destroy them. They just left, leaving him to face the silence he had helped create. That silence began to spread. Planet by planet, station by station, the galaxy realized that the humans weren't fighting for control. They weren't conquering worlds or building empires. They were making a point. Every world they hit, they left behind alive, once but changed. Communication towers gone. Defense networks erased. No power, no pride. Just quiet. The message was clear. You tried to silence us. Now you will live in the silence you gave us. The galaxy was beginning to understand fear again. Not the kind born from chaos, but the cold, heavy kind that comes when you realize the ones you wronged haven't forgotten. And back in the hidden human colonies, the survivors didn't celebrate their victories. They gathered in their halls watching silent screens filled with images of burning ships and falling empires. They felt no joy. Only closure. For them, this wasn't revenge. It was balance. They remembered how their worlds were erased, how the stars themselves seemed to turn away from them. And now, as they watched their enemies crumble, they whispered the same promise they made years ago. Never again. They had become what the galaxy feared most. Not monsters, not conquerors, but survivors who had nothing left to lose. And in the quiet void between the stars, their ships drifted together once more. The commanders looked out at the black sea of space and saw something new. Not victory, but peace. The kind of peace that comes when the world finally understands your silence. The galaxy had once thought humanity weak, emotional, unstable. Now, they finally understood what humans really were. Relentless. And somewhere in the dark, an old voice whispered the truth that would echo across every world for centuries to come. They silenced us with fire. We answered with silence. Now they'll never forget the sound of it. The galaxy had begun to shake. Entire star systems whispered of ghosts. Silent ships that came from nowhere struck without mercy and vanished into darkness before anyone could react. The Galactic Council, once so proud and confident, was falling apart under its own fear. Each world told a different story, but the ending was always the same. Silence. Humanity's attacks had no pattern that the Council could understand. One week they struck a military outpost. The next they hit a shipyard hidden deep inside a nebula. Then they vanished for months, leaving everyone waiting in terror. The Union tried to predict their moves, but nothing worked. The humans weren't following logic, at least not alien logic. They didn't fight for territory. They didn't stay to occupy. They struck like a storm, clean and unstoppable, and then they left nothing but wreckage and fear behind. To the galaxy, it looked like madness, but to humanity, it was method. The survivors of the genocide hadn't become wild or reckless. They had become patient, cold, and exact. Every strike was part of a plan. Every ship moved for a reason. The galaxy saw chaos, but humanity saw order. They were teaching the Council a lesson, not through diplomacy, not through words, but through action. In the shadows, the humans had built something greater than an army. They had built a network of minds, machines, and purpose. Their fleets didn't need central command. Each ship knew its role. Each crew trusted the others completely. They were like parts of a single body, connected, alive, and unbreakable. Their ships were quiet killers. Dark steel, heavy armor, no bright colors, no banners. Every mark on their hull told a story of the past. These weren't war machines made for pride or show. They were tools of survival. Inside those ships, humans worked calmly. They didn't yell or celebrate. Every mission was carried out with precision. They didn't enjoy destruction. They carried it out because they had to. Because if they didn't, no one else would ever understand the price of betrayal. Across the galaxy, other species began to question the Council's actions. They had once believed the lies, that humanity was too dangerous to live. But now, as they saw the Council's fear, they began to wonder what really happened all those years ago. Some whispered, maybe the humans were right, but for the Council it was too late for regret. In one sector, a vast fleet gathered to defend a crucial system, the heart of the Union's military power. Hundreds of ships waited in formation, ready to repel any attack. Generals gave speeches. Soldiers stood proud. They believed that together, they could finally end the human threat. But the humans didn't attack from the front. They attacked from the silence between stars. The first strike didn't come as a missile. It came as a signal. The Union's defense grid suddenly went offline. Command ships lost contact with their fleets. Then one by one, the ships began to explode. Not from enemy fire, but from inside. The humans had hacked their systems, turning their own weapons against them. It wasn't about power. It was about understanding. Humanity had studied their technology, learned it, improved it, and turned it into something the galaxy couldn't control. When the battle ended, not a single human ship was destroyed. The Union fleet was gone, wiped away by its own systems. After the battle, a probe was found drifting in space. It carried no weapons, only one line of text engraved on its surface. "You taught us silence. We learned it well." That message spread faster than any transmission. Entire worlds fell quiet after reading it. The fear wasn't just about the humans' power. It was about what they had become. They weren't attacking out of rage anymore. They were calm, deliberate, almost emotionless, and that scared the galaxy even more than the war itself. The council met in secret to discuss what to do. Some wanted to negotiate, others still demanded total war. But the truth was clear. They were losing. Every attempt to track or intercept the humans ended in failure. The galaxy's strongest weapons meant nothing against enemies who didn't fight the way they expected. Humanity had changed the rules. Even the oldest species, those who had seen thousands of years of war, couldn't understand this kind of warfare. It wasn't conquest. It wasn't destruction. It was message after message, delivered in silence and fire. On distant worlds, alien citizens began to question their leaders. Protests erupted, demanding to know the truth. Why had they destroyed humanity? What had the humans done that was so terrible? The council tried to censor the truth, but it was too late. The stories of the genocide resurfaced. The recordings, the documents, the testimonies. And with them came guilt. In the midst of it all, humanity kept moving forward. Their fleets expanded, but they never took land. They never occupied planets. They came, punished, and left. Back in the hidden colonies, people watched from afar. Screens glowed softly in dark rooms, showing images of burning fleets and retreating enemies. But no one smiled. They didn't see victory. They saw justice, a cold, necessary justice. Elders told the young ones why they fought. They told them of the day their worlds burned, of the children who never grew up, of the voices that were silenced. They told them that the war wasn't about revenge, but remembrance. To make sure no one would ever forget what was done to them, every human carried that memory. Even those who were born after the genocide felt it in their bones. They had grown up under artificial skies, hearing the stories whispered at night. They didn't know the warmth of a real sun, but they knew the fire of determination. The galaxy called them vengeful. The humans called themselves survivors. In one quiet system, far from any war zone, a small alien cargo crew spotted something unusual. A single human ship drifting quietly near an asteroid belt. It didn't move or attack. It just floated there, dark and still. The crew approached carefully, scanning for signals, but found nothing. Then, suddenly, a transmission appeared on their screen. A single sentence. "Remember us." The crew fled. That message wasn't a threat. It was a warning. Across the galaxy, stories like that began to spread. The humans didn't need propaganda or speeches. The silence itself became their message. No one knew where they were based. No one could track them. Some said their ships hid inside the folds of space itself. Others believed they lived among the stars, in massive mobile cities that moved faster than any sensor could detect. The truth didn't matter. What mattered was the fear, because now whenever a world looked up at the night sky, they didn't see peace. They wondered if those distant stars were watching them back, and yet despite all this, humanity wasn't cruel. They never targeted the innocent. They never struck planets without cause. Every move they made was planned, measured. Their anger was precise. Their justice had limits. That was what made them terrifying. Not their power, but their control. Even the alien scholars studying human behavior couldn't explain it. They wrote endless reports trying to understand what drove humanity. Was it revenge? Was it guilt? Or was it something deeper? The need to be understood, even if understanding came through fire. The answer was simple. Humanity didn't want to rule the galaxy. They just wanted to make sure the galaxy would never again try to rule them. In their hidden cities among cold metal halls, humans worked quietly. Every ship that returned from battle was repaired. Every fallen life was honored. There were no medals, no monuments, just memory. And one day, as the fleets gathered once again in deep space, they received new orders. The next strike wouldn't be against a military target. It would be against the heart of the council itself. It was time for the ones who started the genocide to finally face the silence they had created. The humans prepared not with excitement, but with resolve. They knew what had to be done. The galaxy had to understand once and for all that some wounds never heal, and some lessons are learned only through pain. As the engines roared to life and the fleets vanished into folded space, the stars around them seemed to fade. The night itself bent away from their light, and in that moment, every human knew this wasn't about revenge anymore, this was about remembrance. The galaxy had silenced humanity once. Now, humanity would answer, not with words, with silence. The human fleet drifted in deep silence, far beyond the reach of any known star. Their ships were dark, like shadows cut from the void itself. No signals, no broadcasts, no trace of life. From a distance, it looked like a graveyard of steel, but inside, life moved with quiet purpose. This was humanity's heart, a hidden armada that had survived the impossible. They had no homeworld anymore, but they had each other. Each person, each ship, each breath was a part of the same heartbeat. Every screen inside the command halls showed the same image: the Galactic Council's home system. The world where their decisions had begun the genocide. The place where billions of humans had once been condemned by signatures and speeches. And now it would face the silence it created. In the command center of the lead ship, a single voice spoke. Calm, steady, and filled with the kind of weight only time could give. All fleets report ready. Once we enter, there's no return. No one hesitated. They all knew what this moment meant. They weren't going to conquer. They weren't going to destroy everything in sight. They were going to end the lies, to show the galaxy the truth. Outside, the engines of thousands of ships came alive, glowing with a dim blue fire. Space itself seemed to bend as the fleet entered jump formation. Moments later, the sky above the Council's world split open. To those below, it looked like the heavens were tearing apart. Hundreds of ships appeared from the void, sleek, silent, black as night. There was no sound, no warning, just the quiet dread of realization. The humans had come. On the Council world, panic erupted. Alarms blared. Defense fleets scrambled into the air. Every government channel filled with desperate voices shouting orders, begging for reinforcements. But deep down, everyone knew. Nothing could stop them. The humans didn't open fire immediately. They waited, watching, listening. Their ships held position like statues against the stars. Then a single transmission was sent to the entire system. It wasn't a demand for surrender. It wasn't a threat. It was a recording, as an old one. The voice of a human child laughing. Then crying. Then silence. The sound played once and stopped. The meaning was clear. The Council had silenced an entire species once. Now humanity was here to return that silence, not through words, but through presence. Down on the planet, the Council's leaders gathered in their great chamber. They argued, shouted, panicked. Some wanted to fight. Others wanted to surrender. But all of them were terrified. They had built their power on the belief that humanity was gone forever, a story told to justify their rule. And now that lie hung over them like a shadow. Meanwhile, high above, the human fleet began its final movement. They didn't target cities. They didn't aim at civilians. They aimed at the Council's defense grid, the same one that had fired on the human colonies years ago. It had been built with arrogance, filled with the belief that no one could ever challenge their rule. The first human missiles left their launch bays, not hundreds, but only 12. They moved like streaks of light through the void, silent and steady. Each one found its mark. The grid went dark. Then the humans stopped firing. They didn't want destruction. They wanted the Council to look up and see. On the surface, the sky burned bright with trails of light. The people watched in silence as the once invincible shield fell apart. But no bombs followed. No invasion came. Only quiet. The humans weren't here to wipe them out. They were here to make them remember. For the first time in centuries, the Galactic Council, the rulers of thousands of worlds, felt powerless. A message appeared on every screen across the planet. Simple words written in human script. We are the consequence of your silence. Every citizen saw it. Every leader read it. And in that moment, the lies that had built the Council's empire began to crumble. All over the galaxy, live transmissions captured the event. Other species watched in awe. Some cried. Others trembled. But everyone understood one thing. Humanity wasn't the monster they had been told about. They were something else, something greater. On board one of the ships, the human crews stood by their stations, faces calm but heavy with emotion. For some, this was justice. For others, it was closure. But for all of them, it was a reminder. This was not victory. It was the end of a long silence. The council tried to open a communication channel. For hours, they sent messages, pleading for negotiation, for forgiveness, for anything. The humans didn't respond. They didn't need to. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, one last transmission was sent from the human flagship. It was a voice, old, tired, but strong. You took everything from us. You erased our homes, our children, our history. You tried to silence our very existence. But silence taught us something. It taught us patience. It taught us to listen. It taught us that even in the dark we could rebuild. The voice paused. We are not here for revenge. We are here for truth. You called it cleansing. We call it what it was, genocide. You will remember that word, and you will never use it again. Then the signal cut, and the human fleet began to withdraw. They didn't destroy the Council's world. They didn't take its resources. They left it standing, weak, humiliated, and exposed before the entire galaxy. Because for humanity, that was the real victory. They had survived. They had endured. And now, they had shown the truth to everyone who had once looked down on them. As the last human ship vanished into the void, the people of the Council world stood under a sky that felt heavier than ever before. They looked up searching for the ships but saw nothing. Only stars and cold and distant, but those stars no longer looked the same. Because now every light in the night sky reminded them of humanity, of the people they had tried to erase. And across the galaxy, something began to change. Worlds that had once served the Council began to rebel. Species that had been silent began to speak. They started asking questions not about humans, but about themselves. What if we had been them? What if we had been the ones erased? Slowly, the Council's grip began to slip. They lost allies, trade routes, trust. Every system they ruled began to turn away, and behind it all, the legend of humanity grew stronger. No one knew where their fleets had gone. Some said they built new colonies in deep space. Others said they lived among the stars, hidden in the folds of time itself. But everyone agreed on one thing: humanity was still watching. They had no throne, no empire, no crown. But their presence was felt in every decision, every council meeting, every treaty. No one dared to repeat the past. In quiet corners of alien taverns, old veterans told stories. Stories of ships that appeared in the dark, left warnings, and disappeared. Stories of humans who didn't seek revenge, only remembrance. And though the galaxy was vast, the shadow of humanity stretched across it all, not as conquerors, but as survivors who refused to be forgotten. In the hidden human fleet, life went on. Children were born who would never see Earth, but who would grow up hearing its name whispered like a prayer. They would learn about what was lost and why it could never be allowed to happen again. The old generation watched them, proud and silent. They knew their mission wasn't over. The galaxy had seen the truth, but truth fades if it isn't protected. So they kept moving, unseen, unheard, but always present. The galaxy might one day forget the Council, its lies, and its power. But it would never forget humanity, because once the galaxy tried to erase them, and in return humanity taught the galaxy the one lesson it would never unlearn. Silence speaks louder than fear. Years passed after the day humanity appeared over the Council's homeworld. The galaxy slowly began to settle again, but things were not the same anymore. The silence humanity left behind still echoed everywhere, in the halls of power, in the hearts of those who had once believed the lies, and in the stars themselves. The Galactic Council had fallen into shame. Their fleets were broken, their words carried no weight, and their once mighty alliances were crumbling. Many of the younger species refused to serve them anymore. They wanted peace, not rule through fear. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy began to question everything it once believed. But the humans, they had disappeared again. No one knew where they went. Some said they retreated to hidden colonies. Others believed they had merged their ships into vast floating worlds, drifting between systems like silent cities. But one thing was certain: they were still out there, watching, and even though they were silent, their presence was felt. Whenever injustice rose, whenever a planet was attacked by stronger powers, sometimes strange things would happen. A pirate fleet would suddenly vanish without a trace. A tyrant's shipyard would explode in the middle of the night. And somewhere, someone would whisper, "The humans were here." They had become legends, not monsters, not heroes, just people who had endured everything and refused to be broken. In one of their hidden cities, far beyond the mapped stars, life had started to grow again. It wasn't the same as before, and there were no vast skyscrapers or blue oceans, but it was home. Domes filled with light covered the valleys of a quiet, cold moon. Artificial suns kept the air warm. Children ran through narrow corridors filled with laughter, unaware of the pain their elders still carried. For those who had survived the genocide, this was what victory looked like. Not fire, not revenge, but the chance to live again. Inside one of the great meeting halls, people gathered. They weren't soldiers now. They were farmers, engineers, teachers, and explorers. They sat together talking about the future. They had to decide what to do next. Some believed it was time to return to the galaxy, to speak again, to rebuild relations with those who had once been their enemies. Others said humanity should remain hidden forever, safe and separate. The room was silent for a long time. No one shouted. No one argued. They had all seen what anger could do. Finally, an elder stood up and said quietly, "Maybe it's time we stop being ghosts." Those words carried weight, because even though humanity had survived, they had lived in shadows for too long. They had taught the galaxy a lesson, yes, but they had also isolated themselves from everything else. The new generation, those born after the genocide, didn't carry the same hate. They had never seen the burning skies or the ruined cities. They had grown up among stars and steel, surrounded by stories of loss but also hope. They didn't want to live in the past. They wanted to build a future, and so humanity began to change again, quietly, slowly, but surely. The fleets that were once built for war were turned into vessels for exploration. Their engines carried scientists, not soldiers. Their sensors searched for worlds suitable for life, not for targets. Piece by piece, they started creating new homes. Real ones, not just shelters hidden in darkness. Planets that could be reborn, touched by sunlight and rain again. And for the first time since the genocide, laughter returned to the open air. The galaxy watched all this with disbelief. The very species that had once been wiped out now rebuilt themselves without hate or conquest. It confused the old powers. They expected vengeance, not forgiveness, but the humans didn't forgive in words. They forgave by living. Still, they never forgot. In every settlement, on every new world, there stood a monument, not tall or decorated, but simple. A black stone carved with a single phrase, "Remember the silence." It reminded every child of where they came from, and why they could never allow the same thing to happen again, to anyone. As time went on, the legend of humanity changed. The fear began to fade, replaced by respect. Some called them the guardians of the silent stars. Others said they were the watchers, but humans never claimed any title. They didn't need one. They had learned something powerful, that survival wasn't just about fighting. It was about remembering, rebuilding, and protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. And so, when smaller worlds cried for help, it was often the humans who appeared first, not with warships but with aid. They sent medicine, food, and engineers. They helped repair what was broken. Sometimes when pirates or tyrants attacked, human fleets arrived, and still silent, still unseen, and ended the threat in moments. But once it was over, they always left, asking for nothing. The galaxy began to realize what humanity truly was. They were not conquerors. They were not saviors. They were witnesses. Witnesses to what silence can do. The Galactic Council tried many times to reach out, to negotiate, to erase their guilt with treaties and words. But humanity never replied. They didn't need to. Their silence was answer enough. The Council had already been replaced by something new, a loose alliance of independent worlds that believed in fairness, not fear. Many of these new worlds built their laws around one principle: no voice shall ever be silenced again. And that idea came from humanity. Decades passed. The old survivors grew older, their hair silver, their eyes tired but peaceful. They had seen the worst of the galaxy, and yet they had lived to see hope return. One of them stood one night on a balcony overlooking a growing colony. Children were playing under artificial stars. The air smelled faintly of soil and rain. The sound of laughter echoed through the valley. For a long time the elders said nothing. Then softly, almost like a whisper, they said, "This is what we fought for. Not revenge, just this." The person standing beside them nodded. "Will they ever know what it cost?" "Maybe not," the elder replied. "But maybe that's the point. Maybe they shouldn't have to. Because humanity had carried the pain long enough. It was time for the next generation to carry only the light. And so the fleets remained. But they no longer drifted as symbols of fear. They became protectors of peace, moving quietly between stars, ensuring no one repeated the sins of the past. Sometimes, young explorers asked why their ships were still painted black, why they still carried no flags. The answer was always the same. So the stars remember who we were and what silence means. In time, the galaxy changed completely. Trade, trust, and cooperation returned. Old enemies became allies. The scars of the genocide faded, though they were never forgotten. Humanity's story became a lesson taught across worlds, not as a tale of destruction, but as one of endurance, justice, and the power of remembrance. It was said that when a world faced its darkest hour, all it had to do was look up. Somewhere, out there, hidden among the stars, the humans were watching, not to strike, but to remind everyone that life, no matter how fragile, always finds a way back. And perhaps that was humanity's greatest victory. Not their ships, not their weapons, not their silence, but their ability to forgive the universe for what it had done to them, and to love it still. Because even after the genocide, even after centuries of pain, they had found something stronger than vengeance: peace. As the last light of an artificial sun faded over the colony, the stars began to shine above an countless, endless, eternal, and somewhere among them, a whisper seemed to move through the night. We were broken once, but we rose. We spoke in Warheads when no one would listen. Now we speak in peace, and may the stars never forget. The sky shimmered as if the universe itself was listening. Humanity had spoken, not in words, not in anger, but in silence, the kind that lasts forever. And in that silence, the galaxy finally understood. Humanity was never gone. They had simply become the voice of everything that refused to die.